Greetings from Los Angeles. Greetings from Los Angeles County. Greetings from the West Coast. Greetings from not Tokyo, but on the other side of the world or close to it. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our journey, our discussions, our discoveries, and our explorations with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2023. And that brings us to a title which has been designated by Criterion on a new Blu-ray edition at spine number 1183. This is a work which is described as being from the year 2008, and the name of the director is Barry Jenkins, and the name of the work is Medicine for Melancholy. Work from the year 2008, and it stars Wyatt Cenac and Tracy Higgins. Wyatt Cenac playing the character of Micah and Tracy Higgins playing the character of Joe. And it is these two characters that we as viewers follow through the course of their meeting and getting to know each other. In the context of the city landscape, urban landscape that is San Francisco at the time that this film was made, circa 2008. And I'm speaking of this work, which is Medicine for Melancholy. Medicine for Melancholy from Barry Jenkins and Company is now on this wonderful Blu-ray on the Criterion Collection. And so let us, if it's okay with you, speak a little bit about this work and this release and just how poignant and emotional and intimate this work is. And I think if we could focus on that discussion, or if we try to engage with that discussion, I think as with other film discussions, I think one place to go would be talking about the film or plot structure, story structure. And it's a very intriguing structure because from the outset, perhaps immediately from the opening moments, we understand that we have these two characters that we will come to learn about and meet and grow in our, say, relationships with. We meet these two characters immediately. This is Micah and Joe. We will come to know their names pretty soon after this, but we understand, or we can glean from this, or we can interpret from these opening moments that they have just, or they're waking up the morning after a one-night stand. And they are, it seems to have been at some kind of house party, and they're waking up and they are very quietly leaving the house together. Although we can get a sense immediately that these two characters, the Wyatt Cenac character and Tracy Higgins character, Micah and Joe, they don't seem to be forming a connection immediately. You can tell from the very outset, before the opening credits, that there is a distance, there is almost a coolness. They are almost compelled by circumstances to have to walk from the place to a nearby coffee shop. And incidentally, we find out that the geography, for the most part, according to Barry Jenkins and Company, for the most part matches how the film progresses. And the geography I'm speaking of is San Francisco. There are a couple exceptions, I think, which the commentary tracks, or one of the commentary tracks, I think, makes note of in the context of this coffee shop. But we'll talk a little bit about that later. But sorry, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. But we see them fairly distant from each other, or maybe they're trying to get to know each other. In particular, Wyatt Cenac, Micah's trying to have some small talk. Is it or isn't? Is it going anywhere, or is it not going anywhere? I mean, that's part of the moments or the ambiance of these pre-credits or opening moments of the film, and then they leave. But through a certain, say, plot point, in terms of a shared taxi cab ride and a forgotten wallet, then the circumstances of these two characters and their happening to meet each other again via these circumstances, this sets the stage, or this provides the great foundation for the work Medicine for Melancholy, which could be said to be a trek, a journey, a type of getting to know each other type of journey. And those are really among the most, I think, intimate and personal and quite warm and beautiful types of journeys, because what we have is essentially among after or through the application of their being able to meet again, we have the opportunity for these people to get to know each other, to grow in their relationship, if there is any room and capacity for growth in their relationship, and indeed their backgrounds, as we slowly get to know them, become revealed to us. And perhaps there are some points about their backgrounds, let's say backgrounds about how Micah feels about his current living situation in San Francisco, or maybe backgrounds, details pertaining to Tracy Higgins' Jo and her current situation in terms of her where she's living and her professional life and her personal life, and details regarding that. How those details may or may not stand in the way of some kind of possible relationship blossoming between these two characters who, as I say, have just met. They have just met. So in essence, this is the morning after, or the day after, or some time after a one-night stand. And so Barry Jenkins and company describe it as such. A film which is about the morning after, and is a relationship between these two characters possible? Well, I think Medicine for Melancholy sets the stage for that, and indeed we see throughout the course of the running time the, for lack of a better phrase, ups and downs of that forging of a relationship. We see the potential for, say, some kind of intimacy or growth of intimacy that is maybe stunted or halted because of certain roadblocks, emotional roadblocks that emerge along the way. They might be subtle, they might be minute, they might be fairly mundane, or they might be potentially significant. Or they might be significant, but notwithstanding the significance of such roadblock, they might be overcomable. That's continuing the line of the relationship growing between Jo and Micah. As we see them traverse and visit and go to specific spots and places in this city landscape, which is San Francisco, which provides, I think, a lot of interesting backdrop points. So first off, we have certain discussions about their generation, and their generation aspects of that, which I think are in, say, the context of some of the Criterion supplements, the commentary track, and also the discussion with Wyatt Cenac and Nat Sanders, the editor, which is one of the supplements on the Criterion disc. There is, I think, very playful reference to the use of MySpace, which is a very key plot detail in allowing these people to be able to meet each other and to know each other. So that might seem to be somewhat dating the film in a manner of speaking. Barry Jenkins, I think, references this in a type of very modest, almost self-mocking sort of way in one of the commentary tracks. But the point here is that this links their generation to, say, the use of MySpace, living, trying to have a sort of independent work lifestyle while living based on their specific circumstances. Tracy Higgins' Jo and Wyatt Cenac's Micah do exhibit specific and individual circumstances to their work situation and their living situation as well. We visit the places that they live at various points of the film, and they are similar yet markedly different in a lot of respects. And that might also lend itself to, I think, either a veiled or maybe not so veiled discussion or relationship or reference to aspects of the economy and class as it pertains to this generation of these two characters, Jo and Micah. And that discussion might result in different outcomes in different circumstances, because it could be said that while there are similarities between their situations respectively, there are some noticeable differences between the two. So that, I think, is also maybe uh, finely linked to other aspects of, say, an economic or class-related discussion or discussion points that are also emerging in the context of medicine for melancholy. We have very surprising, I think, and refreshing takes on gentrification and the rising cost of living and rising cost of rent, etc. And this is a discussion that's had in a film that's released in 2008, so it's not so far away from this current year that I'm making this video, 2023. But there's still some distance of years. That being said, the points about these aspects that are spoken of in this film feel very, very, very relevant indeed, and perhaps so relevant as to be almost prescient or almost on the nose, very much on the nose. It's an interesting point too, because I think Barry Jenkins and Nat Sanders and others, I think, mentioned the fact that the contemporary reception of this film brought attention to, I mean, it was lauded with praise and critical success, but there was one point of the film that I think was the subject of some criticism. Even from the critics who were praising the film, some critics were criticizing the aspect of the inclusion of the discussions of urban gentrification in this work. However, looking back on this film, even now, 2023, it is a very current and a very relevant issue. And also, one can say that it does point to, or the film does provide hints or clues to suggest that this issue of gentrification is not wholly separated from the current living situations and standards of Joe and Micah, respectively. And as I say, we get a hint of their characters in terms of their living spaces, in terms of how they carry on with each other, and maybe there's a sense of a distance between them that is, the distance is further, say, shortened, and as the film progresses, of course. But there are also some points and hints, I would say, that do link to the notion of economy and class and the application of these points vis-a-vis the current generation and gentrification, etc. So I think that point of the film, including that, makes it a very relevant film, and that point is relevant to the film itself. So that's what I wanted to just try to express here. Also, in the context of Micah's story and Joe's story too, but in particular Micah's story, we have the issue of race and the population of this one of the most populated urban centers of the country, San Francisco. And we have a discussion between the two characters about how, perceptions and concepts and data regarding race and racial identity, as Barry Jenkins and Wyatt Cenac's Micah in particular discuss it, Barry Jenkins in some of the commentary tracks, the idea of blackness and African American identity, and how there seems to be, for Barry Jenkins, as he mentioned it here, and also Wyatt Cenac through maybe indirectly and direct conversations, this struggle or issue with trying to find or forge one's identity in an area where perhaps there are certain race-related issues. Now, there is a great and very poignant and very illuminating point in the film where the two characters, Joe and Micah, do have a very direct conversation with each other about this topic. And indeed, they have a certain tension between them because they don't necessarily find themselves on the same ground. There is some disagreement between the two of them, which goes to show how this film is, I would say, not necessarily going in one direction or the other in terms of, I mean, to use a very extreme phrase, an agenda. Far from it. I would say it's leaving room again for the fact that we have two people in the same or similar generation, but reaching fairly different, or perhaps in some cases extremely different outcomes and conclusions. And those, say, life modes do clash at some points in this film. And that's very refreshing. It's very refreshing to see, and it's not like or it could be a deal breaker between the two of them. Again, you have to watch the film to find out, but that's part of the joy and the beauty of this film. We see these characters who inhabit the other's spaces and who see how, see how the other person thinks and feels. They might want to connect. There might be some disconnect. And even at the points of disconnect, there is a type of honesty and a type of intimate honesty, which I find very refreshing indeed. Um, I wouldn't say that the film sides with one character or the other, although I think there is room for various interpretations. That being said, I think the film gives space to these two actors to inhabit their roles and to let the characters live and breathe and grow within the moment, thus creating situations where there might even be disagreements in the context of a film which is arguably marketable as a type of love story or romance. So I find that scope very refreshing indeed. And I think that's urged on quite triumphantly by the power and the delicacy of the performances. So Tracy Higgins' Joe and Wyatt Cenac's Micah, I mean, these form the heart and soul, the very life essence of the film. And had their relationship or had their performances not worked, I mean, that would have sunk the film in essence. But far from it, it really brings up the film, and it really levitates, and it's the, as I say, the heart and soul is the characters here. And what I love too is there is a sort of physicality in how they react and respond to each other. Even when they're talking about, say, outside of a museum, you can get a sense of in the body language how maybe Tracy Higgins Joe might be somewhat distant from Micah, and Micah might want to urgently know what's going on, but feel a sense of rejection. You can always feel the body language, or the sense of smiling as the characters are smiling when they're doing something as, I think, innocently charming as riding on a carousel. The way that the smiles grow and grow and grow, and then suddenly reach a sense of a kind of crescendo. And it's very natural, and it feels very authentic. And when the ride stops, there is a sense of that immediate, almost direct disappointment. Oh, the ride's over, that kind of thing. Well, these are moments that feel very true and very authentic. And the details in, say, the way that the eye line is directed, or just the way that the arms are folded, or perhaps that the way that certain glances are made, like there's a very famous moment of looking in a mirror, Whitesnake looking in a mirror, for instance, or perhaps just talking face to face, or perhaps sitting behind each other, back to back. I mean, this can also be a very intimate moment, as seen in one of the very key moments in the film. So and it's all down to, well, it's direction, and also the key components being direction, ambiance, the setup, and then the performances. So Wyatt Cenac and Tracy Higgins here really provide powerhouse performances, each in their own ways. And there is also room for the characters' growth, and I love how the actors respectively provide us with so much information, almost to the point of potentially not liking the characters. I mean, there's some aspects of Wyatt Cenac's character that are arguably not wholly likable. Same thing with Tracy Higgins' Joe. Joe is not wholly likable, or arguably so, but that's okay, because that means that they are not, say, two-dimensional cutout characters, but that they are three-dimensional, living, breathing human beings. That, when you meet someone, maybe you might like, or you might connect with 80 or 90% of that person's, say, character or personality, but maybe there's at 5-10% or so that might not necessarily gel or connect with. I mean, that's that kind of feeling. So and then those percentages may vary depending on how well you know the person. Well, it's that kind of feeling which I really love. I love how there's room to maybe find certain aspects of the character somewhat irritable, or somewhat difficult to connect with. But there are also moments that give way to the possibility of connecting with these characters on a very intimate and emotional level. And I'm talking from the viewer's perspective, in which I find great. I find that so great. So the whole package is there, and that full package is absolutely splendid, and absolutely makes the connection between the viewer and the film even more poignant. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that, I think, is very powerful indeed. And this is going to be mentioned too in the commentary track discussions, or the commentary tracks, because there are two of them here. But the way in which we have the camera movement. I mean, there's going to be talk about the use of the camera that they used to create this almost the word that's used is desaturated look, and there is for almost for the most of the film, there is very few exceptions where it uses a different type of look but for the most part, it's using this type of desaturated look, which I think adds to a sense of creating almost a, I don't want to say quasi documentary feel, but there is part of that. There's also maybe a subliminally spiritual link with neorealism in the way in which the landscape is projected, and we get a sense too of the DIY homemade feel of this film. I mean, this is a handmade, homemade film that seems to be made from bits and pieces of their own lives, Barry Jenkins and the crew, cast and crew respectively, and from their own lives. And so I find that authenticity really shining through, and that's, I think, due to the camera work and also the direction. At the same time, there are some winks to the camera. There's some winks to the audience. I love the film references. There's a lot of great cinema references to Barbara Loden, to the 400 Blows, to Jean-Luc Godard, and etc. So this is also a fun film to watch for cinema lovers and the like, as well as this type of, say, progression of a relationship. I think Barry Jenkins has mentioned influences such as Richard Linklater, such as Claire Denis, and others. And so I find that those cinematic links, as far as inspiration is concerned, I think very insightful indeed. And that is also setting the stage for this type of description of the film, which is it could be seen as a romance, it could be seen as a romantic comedy, that's for sure. It could also be seen as a human drama about connection, about the possibility or impossibility of connection in the quote-unquote modern era, or the 2008 generation of Wyatt Cenac and Tracy Higgins and Barry Jenkins and others, and the possibility of connection, and whether it is indeed possible. And if the answer to that question is yes, what are the stakes and what are the consequences and outcomes of that possibility of connection? And you throw into the mix possible discussion points revolving around economy, class, urban gentrification, race and race relations and representations, as well as just a feeling of oneself and either feeling lost amongst the chaos, or perhaps feeling the possibility of finding some kind of balance or centering in one's life. So, or perhaps somewhere in between, somewhere in the middle. And how we determine that, that's up to the individual. And we meet two of such individuals, so expertly rendered and so expertly represented and portrayed in this film. And those individuals I'm referring to are Micah and Joe, Wyatt Cenac's performance and Tracy Higgins' performance in this film, which is created by a group of very talented individuals and artists, including writer-director Barry Jenkins. This is the work which is Medicine for Melancholy. The Criterion Collection has released this film, Medicine for Melancholy, on this Blu-ray edition at spine number 1183. And I'm just opening it here because I've already taken the disc and I've put it in the player here, so that's why we have the Blu-ray menu here on display. And also on this side you'll have the fold-out insert, and I've already taken the liberty of removing that for purposes of today's discussion. And one of the reasons I want to do that now is just to point out the presentation details. According to this is described as being a new high-definition digital master approved by Barry Jenkins and director of photography James Laxton, with 5.1 surround DTS HD master audio soundtrack. So more details about this particular master are found in the fold-out right here, and I quote, "Medicine for Melancholy is presented in its original aspect ratio of 1.78 to 1. The film was shot with a Panasonic AG HVX 200, and the entire production was completed in a fully digital workflow. This new digital master features additional color grading performed and approved by director of photography James Laxton and director Barry Jenkins. The film features a fully digital 5.1 surround soundtrack." So this, I think, is this is a film where, unfortunately, my expertise with this in terms of release and seeing how it looked, say, prior to the so-called, let's see, additional color grading that was performed, at least according to this. So my eye can't identify what has been added and what hasn't. So again, my experience with this film and the releases, say prior to this Criterion release and then including this Criterion release, I admit it's very limited. So I can't spot the differences in a manner of speaking. But just in terms of, say, how I feel and my, for lack of any lack of any expertise, I can only speak from my own subjective experience, and I can say that there is a way in which the sort of digital type of grain, if that makes any sense, feels very much intact when watching this film on the Criterion release. And the colors, I mean, I can't tell if anything has been overly added or overly changed in terms of the color scheme, but what I can say is that when I'm watching this film on the Criterion disc on the TV here, there's another TV in another room actually, but when I'm watching this on the player, I get a sense of how say, I don't want to say flat, but I mean use that in a very purposeful and very complimentary way. But there is a way in which the decor and ambiance feels very much. There is a type of color scheme look to it, a film that makes everything almost a type of cloudy, maybe not grayish, maybe not blue hues, etc. But there is a type of cloudiness. And I feel that to be it's almost to the extent it almost feels at certain moments to be entering into the world of black and white. But that is a beautiful thing. That is absolutely a beautiful thing because there's this magic. It reaches that sweet spot of a color film that almost imperceptibly at points enters into the black and white realm. It's that type of color scheme. And so I find that, I think, very much part of what Barry Jenkins and company describe in I think the earlier commentary track that's included as this Criterion release as a quote-unquote desaturated look. And I think this was something that a lot of critics at the time, at least that's how they describe it, how a lot of critics at the time really hooked onto this, the aesthetic. And I think it works very well. It works very well because it does have this ability to create a sort of ambiguous feel. The morning after, there's almost a sluggishness when one watches the film through this type of lens, or when one is wanting to enjoy the type of, say, landscape. There's also a beauty in the way that some of the outdoor shots or landscape shots are used, or even the street scenes are shot, and the way that the sun shines through. There's a sort of beauty of that. Or even the inner scenes, the interior scenes. There's a type of some aspects have a sort of a feeling of a type of languid, static nature, which I think is part of the psychology of the moment at the time. Or there are moments where there's a sort of liveliness. And I find that interchange working very well in terms of the quote-unquote desaturated nature. And I think that desaturated nature really comes through when I'm watching this on the player. And also the way that looks and feels, and sounds too, because sound is very important. There are moments where you get moments of almost imperceptible silence, followed by real intriguing and almost experimental uses of music, which I find incredible, absolutely incredible. So, and then the dialogue too. The dialogue is at that sweet spot of being not sounding overly recorded, but also not sounding so muffled as to be imperceptible. On the contrary, it's that wonderful zone of intimacy, which I think is captured so very well. So that's my very roundabout and perhaps mishmash way of saying how I think the way that this film looks and feels as I play this on the player really creates the psychological effect. I think that's the point, or that's one of the points that's meant to be engendered when one is watching this film. And if that's the case, and if my understanding is correct, then I think it does its job very, very well. So in that way, I'm very impressed with this. I mean, it is a digital film, and so there are, I think, really wonderful concepts and wonderful discussion points and talking points about the aspect of handling digital data for the purposes of masters and for the purposes of say future presentations and releases, such as the Criterion release. So it might be a similar yet different conversation when one is talking about original materials that are film based rather than digital database. But I think I mean I love the way that Barry Jenkins and company speak about some of those aspects in some of the supplements, including there's a camera test as well. So I love that. And it does remind us too that, yes, in the realm of digital, there are these implications and considerations that are very precise, very detailed about how to achieve a certain look. I mean, you can tell from the discussion, and I'm not an artist, I'm not a photographer, so I can only assume. But my assumptions are that achieving this look is a very difficult feat indeed. You have to have all the precise combinations of, say, technical specifications and lenses and the precise, say, settings, etc., which is not an easy thing. And one offsetting might totally shift the balance of the look of the film, and the look of the film and the sound of the film is very key indeed in terms of the success of this medicine for melancholy. So in this roundabout way, let me say, yes, I think this presentation is very effective indeed. So, but that's not all with this Criterion release, because as you can see, I have now gone to the menu and I've pressed the commentary submenu, and when you press that, you have the option of listening to one of two commentary tracks, not just one, but two commentary tracks that are available. So that is fantastic. The first commentary track is described as being from the year 2008, and this is featuring in the same room, so they're talking with each other while they're watching the film. This is, let's see here, Barry Jenkins, who is a writer-director, and then also producer Justin Barber, and also producer Sherry Salter, and then editor Nat Sanders. And we'll see Nat Sanders in another supplement as well. But these artists and collaborators are together and featured on this commentary track. So it's great to hear these artists, and you can tell they have such a great rapport and style, and they don't talk over each other, and they respect each other's opinions and viewpoints, and there are some points of maybe some slight differences in interpretation, and it's just overall a wonderful, pleasant atmosphere and group, included in which is Barry Jenkins, writer, producer. So they speak about, among other things, how they came to this work, how they met each other prior to this work, their associations and friendships with each other, Barry Jenkins and film school, etc. And then Barry Jenkins' own film journey. He's so modest, Barry Jenkins. It's really wonderful to listen to Barry Jenkins' interviews and to hear him speak about his own life and his own film journey and his own take on cinema, and how he was, I don't want to say struggling, but he was really trying to figure out, I mean, he wanted to tell these stories, and he was talking about writing and how this year in particular was a very productive year in terms of writing scripts, but he really wanted to make this. And so, how could he make this? And he was, and he was talking about working in the storage or the shipping section of the not Barnes and Noble, but the Banana Republic store in a certain very early hour shift time. I think he mentions 5:30 a.m. to 2. And he also met some people through his work, which also, some of these people also show up in the film, and that's remarked upon in this commentary track along the way. So he also talks about the circumstances, some of the difficulties in making the film. This is a very do-it-yourself, DIY type of affair. So super independent film with a very limited budget and limited means. Small crew, maybe limited in terms of where they could shoot, so it was pretty much shoot as much as you can and then try to go to the next location before you get into trouble. It was that type of affair. And then also trying to find the right actors and working within the network of people that you know to find and to discover Wyatt Cenac and Tracy Higgins, and also their working relationship. There's talk here about Wyatt Cenac's moments in terms of because Whitesnake is a comedian, and Whitesnake finds fame in other programs and other areas like the Daily Show, etc. But here we have Whitesnake and how he came to this project and working with him, and there are moments of improvisation as well, and how he is a natural comedian. And so when there are moments in the script that point towards a comic aspect, they describe how he really leapt towards that and really created its own while still within the character of Micah. So this is, I think, really wonderful. And there are some biographical moments too about how some of the places that Joe and Micah visit are reflective of Barry Jenkins' own life and his own feelings about himself and his identity, both as an artist, also as someone living in San Francisco and other cities, landscape areas, as in terms of his own, say, racial identity as well. He's very honest and upfront about this, and a lot of these points are infused into the film itself and the story of these two characters. So, and a lot of the places that they go to are reflective of Barry Jenkins' own life as he was living in the space at the time. So, and then we have the other participants here, the producers also speaking about the limited nature of the production, but that didn't stop them for trying to exercise their creativity in an incredibly explosive way. And aspects of the editing, this is also mentioned elsewhere, but it was a very much a hands-on type of thing, and Barry Jenkins was very open, and the producers were very open, and Nat Sanders' editor was very open to exploring each other's ideas, and so there's a real feeling of camaraderie and collaboration between and among these actors, and this is great. I mentioned too the idea of, I love how they also point to some of the ways in which they're trying to be faithful to the actual geography of San Francisco, but there are points where they do make some liberties along the way. I think I mentioned early on, they talk about the walk up the hill in the opening moments, the morning after, between the two of them, and then they go to a coffee shop, and they describe how the coffee shop is actually on the other side of town or something like that, so they couldn't have walked there. So that's one place where they took somewhat a liberty in terms of the geography of San Francisco, which I thought was really cool. Especially, I don't know San Francisco very well, but these sorts of details I think really make for some very engaging commentary, some of the background info. I love this stuff. And talk too about details about choosing some of the clothing choices for the characters, that look, the desaturated look of the photography that I was referring to earlier, and this idea of the diaspora, and also the idea of, or the issue of gentrification, and a reflection on San Francisco in terms of the living space, the living quarters. I mean, to quote one of the lines from Whitesnake's character, "I hate this city, but I love this city." So there is already immediately a type of contradiction in terms and also in feelings and in atmospheres and in concepts of oneself in the context of the cities. And I think that was part of what these artists wanted to portray in the film. And they do acknowledge along the way there might have been some critical hiccups. Like, they do acknowledge that the point about the discussion of gentrification of San Francisco and the rising cost of living and rent, how this is, in the eyes of those people in the conversation, threatening the very the lives of the people who are living here. And it's a very big issue. Well, this was considered at the time to be somewhat of a critical point of the film, but I think the artists in the commentary track, I think, not only are very respectful in disagreeing with those points, I think are very much pointing to the fact that it is very prevalent and it's very prescient and very relevant. This commentary track where the group of them are talking, it's dated 2008, so circa around the same time as the release of the film. But watching it now, listening to the commentary track, 10, 15 years after it was made, it still rings true, and you can get a sense that, oh yeah, maybe they were right all along. So I think those points and other points make for really engaging commentary track discussion. So please check it out if you can. That's the first commentary track, the 2008 one. Then we have the 2023 commentary track, which is with Barry Jenkins himself. And he mentions almost immediately on the commentary track about how this is the first time in a number of years that he's watching this film again. But it's good to have that hindsight because he can then look at it from the currency of the lens of the moment, and then also just recount ideas and feelings that he had about this. And it is such a rewarding commentary track. There are some points that he mentions that are mirroring comments that were made in the other 2008 commentary tracks. So you're getting, for example, reference to Claire Denis, the film Friday Night, which is a key text, a key inspiration point for Barry Jenkins and company. Now, this point was mentioned in the other commentary track. It's also mentioned here. There's also to the point where you wanted to use an actual musical quote from the film, which I thought was a very fascinating further detail in terms of cineast life and also of the emotional spiritual link between Barry Jenkins' work and Claire Denis' work. There's also mention here in the 2023 commentary track to Richard Linklater and the Before series, which I don't recall. I could be wrong. I don't recall it being mentioned in the 2008 commentary track. If I'm wrong about that, please correct me. But my hunch or my understanding is that it was only mentioned in the 2023 Barry Jenkins commentary track. And if that's the case, that's one area where we have an interesting difference between the commentary tracks and his take. He does mention too context about working in terms of creative spirit. He does make reference to other works like Moonlight, etc. He does laugh. He's almost embarrassed when MySpace comes up, which is he shows even more sort of a lovable embarrassment, shall we say, now in the 2023 commentary track. He does talk about relationships here. He speaks about how he had his own relationships and relationships that were at the time, or maybe they had broken off relationships, and how part of those feelings were reflective in the film that he was trying to make, and also how a lot of that informed his feelings about his own racial identity, what he refers to here. He talks about, in his words, blackness. And so how that is a part of his own sense of self as an artist and as a human being, and how that is, of course, reflective in the works that he makes, because they are very much intimately linked to his own feelings and biography and ideas. And so we see how there's a lot of mirroring in terms of that, and Wyatt Cenac's character in particular. So it's a very personal film. It's a very personal film, and he's speaking about how, never in his wildest dreams did he think that when he and his fellow artists and collaborators were making this film in around circa 2008. Never did he think that he would be sitting here 10, 15 years later, recording the commentary track for the film that would be released by the Criterion Collection. And so I found that to be an interesting thing. Incidentally, I love Barry Jenkins' Criterion Collection contributions. We see him appear in a number of places and a number of other supplements. And also there's a great Criterion Collection closet video of Barry Jenkins. I think it's one of the classics. But so yes, and for these and other reasons, we have the 2023 Barry Jenkins commentary track. So you've got to check it out if you can. It's definitely worth it. So you have two choices. I love this. I love it when you have not one but two commentary tracks. It doesn't happen often with Criterion releases. But if it's possible, please, yes, Criterion, please try to include as many commentary tracks as possible. And I love too how we have a 2008 commentary track and then a contemporary commentary track made, according to what Barry Jenkins says at some point in the film, made specifically by the Criterion Collection. And if that's the case, then wow. It makes me want Criterion to make commentary tracks for all of their releases, and also bring over archived commentary tracks so you can have packed releases as possible. The more the merrier, I would say. And the technology is there. You can include not one, but two, three, maybe more. Who knows? But if you can include one or more, that's certainly great. And you see it here. These are great. Please check out the film with the commentary tracks if you're able to. It's really fantastic indeed. And then let us now talk about the supplements. And so we have here the menu. And sorry about this. There's the supplements menu, and I don't know if you can make it. I'm now pressing to the supplements here. And as you can see, there are 4 supplements. So in terms of quantity, that might not seem like the most packed release ever. And if you feel that way as terms of a critical point of this Criterion release, that's totally fair. I totally get it. But let's just talk first about what those supplements are, and then we can go from there. So the first one is called Be More Bandry. And this is making medicine for melancholy. Be More Bandry. Making Medicine for Melancholy. This is described as being from the year 2023, so it's a Criterion produced supplement. And this is a discussion with Wyatt Cenac and also a discussion with Nat Sanders. So it's a kind of one-on-one discussion with each of these artists, and it's edited together to form this overall supplement, totaling 19 minutes total, 19 minutes. Again, Nat Sanders is the editor of the film. Wyatt Cenac is one of the stars of the film. And so each of them speaks in their own way about meeting Barry Jenkins and the circumstances surrounding their associations with Barry Jenkins that led up to their participations in the film. Nat Sanders talks about the associations he had with Barry Jenkins at school, and then Wyatt Cenac talks about how he ended up on the film and being one of the key stars of the film. And Nat Sanders also speaks about Claire Denis and Friday Night. Wyatt Cenac also talks here about his own performance and how Micah was very much like an outsider, which was, according to Wyatt Cenac, very much or part of how Wyatt Cenac felt as well personally. So there are all these personal points that are infused in the film, not just Barry Jenkins, not just Nat Sanders, Wyatt Cenac and Tracy Higgins as well. He does speak too about Tracy Higgins and working with Tracy Higgins. There was a way in which they worked together, and there was they didn't necessarily get to know each other so closely immediately, which I think favors the performances very well, because as you recall from watching the film, from the very opening moments, there is a distance between the two of them. And I think that aspect of their professional relationship, I think, serves the film very well, at least according to Wyatt Cenac. So it's not like I don't want to suggest it was not like they were fighting or anything, like not at all, but it was just the circumstances of their working together were such that maybe during, especially the preparation of the film, it wasn't like they were rehearsing a lot. I mean, that's what Wyatt Cenac suggests, which I think serves the function of the film in terms of the plot progression, as well as the performances, the nuances of their performances really, really well. Then there's talk about South by Southwest and how this was the place in which this film really exploded on the scene. And it became a thing. It became a type of phenomenon as well, which is wonderful. They talk too about the very rugged, do-it-yourself style of the film, and how it was a very intimate settings. There's shots involving a very cramped apartment space and how they work towards that. This detail about playing the guitar, which I think is a really lovely detail. Shooting on location and essentially wondering if they are going to get in trouble from the authorities because they weren't necessarily permitted. They didn't get all the permits perhaps necessary to do all the outdoor shooting, etc. But they did what they could based on their very, very limited resources, which is brilliant. And so this is splendid indeed. I think what would have been really cool is if we could have had other participants speak too about their experiences and memories working on the film. It would have been great to have Tracy Higgins featured on this, or maybe on a separate supplement. It would have been so great. The fact that she is not present for these discussions, I guess Criterion tried their best, but it just couldn't. It couldn't happen. But that would have been really fantastic to have also heard from Tracy Higgins as well, who is a key component in the film. That being said, we hear from Nat Sanders and Wyatt Cenac. And Wyatt Cenac does mention, as I say, talking or working with Tracy Higgins, working with Barry Jenkins, and the impact the film had on his career. And how Barry Jenkins, how he so respects and admires Barry Jenkins as an artist. Nat Sanders, too. There's a great ending of this as well. Wyatt Cenac, as he ends this, you got to watch to the very end. It's so funny. It's fantastic. So this is a great supplement indeed. And this is the only supplement with kind of a one-on-one discussion interview section, as we'll talk about the other supplements as well. Those other supplements are great, and this supplement is great, and the commentary tracks that are included are really great. Again, if there was maybe one or two other supplements that could have been included, maybe an overview of Barry Jenkins' life and career, or maybe other participants such as Tracy Higgins, if those were included in some capacity, that would have been, I think, so awesome and so cool. But be that as it may, what we get here with Nat Sanders and Wyatt Cenac is awesome. It is awesome. So please check this out if you can. This is Be More Bandry. Oh, and they do talk too, Nat Sanders does, about the meaning of this Be More Bandry. I think it's a really interesting artist speak between him and Barry Jenkins and that group of artists, which I thought was really cool. Be More Bandry. So you get to find out what that means. That and other things in this great supplement, again, from 2023, approximately 19 minutes. And then that's not all, because then we get a camera test. Oops, I should stop that. There we go. There we go. Then we get a camera test, and I've just paused it at the point here where it's talking about a description of this. And this is a camera test shot by cinematographer James Laxton on his Panasonic AG HVX200 while accompanied by associate producer Amy Simetz and director Barry Jenkins. This footage features Jenkins and his friend Brittany Edwards rehearsing Micah and Joe's walk from the Museum of the African Diaspora to Yerba Buena Gardens while the filmmakers gauge the depth of field, experiment with desaturation levels, and discuss filming logistics. Please note that this footage was archived in a highly compressed file format, which greatly affects resolution. So here we have, and I apologize for the reflection of the windows here on the here, but it would be hard to see. I apologize for that. Please forgive me in my very amateurish lighting scheme here. I hope you can forgive me. But in any event, that goes. There we go. So I think this is here is another instance of an example of how the camera is used. And when you get to see the footage, you see that it's Barry Jenkins and Brittany Edwards walking. And there's a moment also where you hear a little bit of their speaking, but more or less it's the walking footage. And you get a sense of the atmosphere and how the place looks and feels. I should point out that there are moments in the other supplement where you get to see actual photographs and stills on location, and they are color stills, and they're they're photographs which look so different from how the AG HVX 200 looks, the quote-unquote desaturated look of the film. Even in this camera test, the difference between a photograph taken on location versus the actual look of the film, it is stark. It's so, I mean, it's stunning. And you get a sense of that even in the quote-unquote camera test, which is really great. And it's a kind of random, just a random thing. And there's no script, I think. It's just talking and walking. And then there's a moment, too, where you get the camera up close on the faces of these people, both in front and behind the camera, and there you hear them talking. So I think that's also a sort of experiment as to how close-ups look and how the sound might register. So you get the sense of the close-up on the face, on the visage, and also the sense of the atmosphere as these two characters or these two people are walking. So very fascinating stuff. Again, from my vantage point, someone who is not an artist, I'm very much an amateur, and I'm very much not a technician, so I don't know these details of photography, either film photography or digital photography. But with that lack of expertise, I acknowledge something like this, looking at something like this is very illuminative for me, and very much showing, again, how much care was taken in trying to achieve this digital look, which is fascinating, absolutely fascinating. So that is an indication of the way in which this film appears right here. So please check it out. This is approximately 13 minutes. And then going back to the main menu, let us now go to a discussion of the final couple of supplements. Next is a blooper reel, and this is approximately 2 minutes. And here we have the look looks a little bit different. So it's interesting to see how maybe this is an indication too of how the look of the film was, or the footage was further treated post-production, because here we get the pre-treated, or my sense is the pre-treated nature of this. So it's a little bit more, there's a little bit more color in the frame, which I think is an interesting detail. Another interesting detail of the blooper reel is that you get the behind the scenes stuff with the actors. It's very brief. It goes by very quickly. It would have been nice to see more of this, but for what it's worth, what we get, it's really great. So this is approximately 2 minutes. And then the fourth and final supplement is the trailer, which is also fun. IFC Films logo begins it. At least, right, IFC logo, yeah. So in any event, that rounds out the supplement. So as I mentioned before, it would have been nice to see more supplements in the supplements submenu. That would have been really cool, but what we do get is fantastic. And also we have to remind ourselves that we get so much info packed in these supplements, as well as what we got in not one but two commentary tracks which accompany the film itself. So if you think about the combined total of the two commentary tracks plus these supplements, I think I reached the conclusion that it's I think a really reasonably stacked release, and it makes me want to know more. Indeed, that is maybe if that's one of the objectives of watching the supplements on a release, then this achieves that goal very, very competently indeed. So well done. And then now let us turn to the artwork and to the essay and other aspects of this release. So let's turn first to this artwork. And again, I apologize for the glare and the poor lighting, etc. I hope you can forgive me. It's definitely worth checking this out in person if you can, or looking at better high-resolution pictures online on the Criterion website, for example. But here's the sense of the artwork and design, which is also reflective in the menu here. I love this rendering and look. It has, again, this hand-drawn, homemade feel, which is very much in keeping with the quote-unquote independent film DIY handmade quality of the film itself. So I love these drawings. This is such a great drawing, and it's continued on into the fold out here. So look at that. Isn't that lovely? These are really lovely indeed. So great. Oh gosh, I love that. And look at this. Look at this. They even reflect the sense of desaturated color scheme of the film, and you can get a sense of that. There's one point where you get this flash of color here with the flowers, which I think, or the outer decor, which I think is really, really nice indeed. So anyway. And it also, there's a flow here as well. If you know the story of the film, you can get a sense too that there is a progression in the drawings leading up to what might be called the beginning, middle, and the end. So well done. I love this so much. Just a quick note about the artwork, as mentioned here in the fold out here. It says, excuse me, I apologize here. Production credits. Art director Sarah Habibi, Eric Skillman. Design and illustration Alphaville. So well done for that. I love this look, and I love this aesthetic, and I love the font, etc. And then a quick word about the cover art design. I'm sorry, the cover art design. The fold-out, excuse me. A quick word about the fold-out insert. It is a fold-out insert, and I'm not a fan of the fold-out insert, as some of you may know. I much rather see a staple booklet. I think it's more robust. It packs more in it. There's room for further sort of, it feels like a little mini book. I prefer that feel. But be that as it may, we have a great essay here, a wonderful essay by Danielle Amir Jackson. And it is here, Love in a Hopeless Place. And this is another splendid one. My strong suggestion is watch the film first, and then you can read the essay, because there are some points that are mentioned about the actual plot and the progression of the film itself. But I think that's what makes the essay so great. It goes into those details, as well as details of Barry Jenkins' career and how this figures in so importantly in his the context of career leading up to very recently. So for these and other reasons, you've got to check this essay out. Love in a Hopeless Place. Please check out this essay if you can right here. And so, my dear friends, that concludes what I wanted to say very briefly about Medicine for Melancholy, released by the Criterion Collection. This is another shining example. This is a great thing to see. Barry Jenkins in the Criterion Collection with this work. It's great to see. It's wonderful to have Barry Jenkins' voice and the cast and crew's voices here embodied for this work, which is again, it feels very current, very relevant. It also feels part of its time, which I think is one of the great balancing acts of wonderful works of art and cinema. And Barry Jenkins' Medicine for Melancholy is certainly up there. It's a great release, so please check it out if you can. Medicine for Melancholy. All right, my dear friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great movies, including Medicine for Melancholy and others. So until the next video, my dear friends, stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.